In a village forgotten by rain and mercy, where cracked earth split open like broken promises, survival demanded impossible choices. Once, men here sold cattle. Then tools. Then land. When everything was gone except their children, they began to sell their daughters, not out of cruelty, but desperation. One by one, girls were brought to the village square, dressed in borrowed brightness and masked smiles, their futures handed to the highest bidder. The buyers came from distant places, men with quiet eyes and heavy purses, looking for workers, wives, or worse. Layla was the youngest. Barely 12, her frame was too slight, her voice too silent, and her spirit too visibly bruised to catch any interest. The sun beat down on her small figure as she stood at the end of the wooden platform, arms by her sides, not crying, not begging, just waiting. She had watched her older sisters go. First with hope. Then with fear. None returned. She didn't ask where. The auctioneer's voice faltered now. There were no more bids. People murmured. Some turned their faces. Not worth the bread, someone whispered. Layla didn't flinch. She was used to being passed over, too quiet, too plain, too much like a shadow. When the crowd thinned, she remained, the only unsold daughter. Dust clung to her feet like the memory of those taken before her. No one came forward. No hand was raised. The world had decided she was not even worth buying. And yet, she still waited. The square emptied slowly, like a storm cloud fading into silence. Layla remained on the wooden platform, barefoot, hands clenched behind her back. Her eyes scanned the dust-blown road her sisters had vanished down, carts creaking under the weight of fear and forgotten dreams. The auctioneer packed his book away, his voice dry from shouting names that no one cared to remember. No one spoke to Layla. No one told her to leave. She simply stood there, as if stepping down would mean accepting she was truly alone. Around her, villagers whispered in low tones. She's cursed, an old woman muttered. That's why no one wants her. Another shook his head, she won't survive the week. No one dared meet her eyes. It was easier to look through her, easier to pretend she wasn't real, just a leftover echo of something too painful to fix. A breeze swept through the square, lifting the edge of her faded shawl. She pulled it closer, not out of modesty or shame, but to hold on to something. The cloth had once belonged to her mother. It was all she had left of her, a scent, a warmth, a memory sewn into threadbare cotton. The sun began to fall, casting long shadows that reached for her but never touched. Still, Layla didn't cry. Her lips parted slightly, as if wanting to ask the sky a question it could not answer. She was invisible, it seemed, not gone, just unseen. And still, she waited. The last of the crowd was fading when the sound of slow, steady footsteps broke the silence. Layla didn't look up at first, too many had passed without stopping. But this man wasn't like the others. He wore worn-out shoes, his coat patched and dusty, yet he walked with quiet purpose. His face was weathered, carved by grief and years, but his eyes held something rare, gentleness. He stepped onto the platform, where Layla still stood alone. The auctioneer, startled, opened his ledger again. "You looking to bid?" he asked. The man shook his head. "I've nothing to bid with," he said plainly. "Not gold. Not grain." The crowd paused. Those still nearby turned to watch. The man looked at Layla, not as a burden or bargain, but as someone. "My name is Haroun," he said softly. "I lost my wife and daughter to the fever last winter. Since then, my house has been too quiet. Too cold." He paused, searching Layla's eyes. "I have little, but what I do have, a warm bed, a roof, a name. I offer to her." A ripple of murmurs rose from the crowd. No one had ever offered a name before. They offered coin, goats, sacks of flour, but never belonging. She won't eat your name, someone scoffed. Haroon didn't flinch. She'll eat bread. I'll find it. But she'll survive because someone called her family. And for the first time that day, Layla looked up. Not afraid. Not ashamed. Seen. For a moment, the village stood frozen. The auctioneer frowned, unsure whether to laugh or wave the man away. This isn't charity, old man, he muttered. She's not a stray dog to take in for pity. Layla felt the eyes on her, sharp, judgmental, hollow. She had felt them before, but this time they didn't pierce as deeply. Haroon still stood beside her, his hand open, waiting, not demanding, not begging. Someone in the crowd scoffed, a name won't feed her. She'll be starving by winter. Another called out, let her go. She's cursed, anyway. The air was thick with mockery, but Haroon's face remained calm. He looked at Layla, not the crowd. You've waited long enough, he said gently. But you don't need to wait for someone to buy you. You were never for sale. Layla blinked. Her legs trembled, not from weakness, but from something stirring inside, something she hadn't felt in months. She stepped down from the platform. Slowly. Carefully. Like stepping into a new life. Gasps rose from the crowd. The girl who had stood still like a shadow now moved like someone waking from a long sleep. She walked to Haroon and placed her small hand in his. Not a transaction. Not a rescue. A choice. And in that single step, Layla rewrote everything. She was no longer the girl left behind. No longer forgotten. She wasn't sold. She was chosen. The seasons turned, as they always do, but something in the village had changed. Where silence once clung to doorways and sorrow bent the backs of its people, laughter slowly returned. First like a whisper, then like song. In the modest home at the edge of the fields, Layla tended a small garden, her hands now steady, her eyes bright. Haroon taught her to read by candlelight, his voice filling the quiet corners of the house that had once mourned a daughter lost. They became a family not of blood, but of choice, something even the village began to notice. Haroon had little, but he shared everything. Layla grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. She smiled without fear. Spoke without apology. Word of what happened that day at the auction spread beyond the square. Others began to question the old ways. Why must desperation mean daughters were for sale? Why couldn't they be loved, protected, believed in? A widow with empty rooms took in 2 orphaned girls. A young couple chose to foster a child they once saw as cursed. The auctions stopped. Not by law, but by hearts waking up. And when people asked Layla what changed her life, she didn't speak of rescue or luck. She simply said, someone offered me a name when I had none. And with it, a place to belong. Hope, it turns out, is not always loud. Sometimes, it begins with a hand held out, and someone brave enough to take it.